Let's talk about comparing objects. As we stated earlier, the collection ADT has a buffer regardless of the underlying implementation approach. Collection does not, from an ADT standpoint, require elements to be of any certain order, and the collection itself does not require the object to be placed and removed in a certain order either. This means that we have to implement some sort of comparisons approach, and this comparison approach could be done natively through equals equals, or we can invoke Java objects dot equal method. In this subsections, we'll be talking about the compare-to operations, making use of an example which is also available in your modules, and that example is called famousperson.java. We can use the native equals equals to compare objects in Java. Equals equals should be used doing reference comparisons. Equals equals check if both references, right, left-hand side and right-hand side, points to the same location or not. So if you were to do integer a equals integer b, evaluates true. In addition to checking for references, it also checks for the value. So if you have two primitives, and these primitives are integer primitives, if they both have value 10, this integer comparisons is always true, assuming both values are the same. If both sides of the object are not primitives, but simply objects, then the references are being checked for whether they are from the same location or not. So recall that a reference is an indirect address containing the address of the target. This object right here and this object right here, they occupy two different memory addresses. So if the first one has 0 times f8.1, the second one may be coming from 0 times fz123. These addresses have integer values. So if you're not from the same addresses and you're comparing this, what this equals equals is basically the address, the value inside these variables. What is this variable? This is an object, and it has a value pointing to one is this value and the other one is this. So this is going to be false. However, if you do C1 equals to C2 and if both points to the same memory address, then this equals equals evaluates to true. This is not very flexible. Sometimes you want to look into a specific object. For example, if the object has a certain parameters that you want to compare to against the property from the other object, you want to overwrite this object's specific comparators. And that is what we're going to be talking about in the next slides. Equals is a method of object class. So every object has a default equals comparison. So this equals comparison class compares to see if both objects are the same. So this is a method on an object, and then you can simply insert an argument to this equals method from comparisons. This C1's object method equals will compare itself against C2. That's how this is used. The object equals method should be used for content comparisons only, right? This content against C1 content. This method is defined in the object class, acts much the same as a comparison operator. It returns true only if the two variables reference the same object. Let's take a look at what this equals is doing and also what we can do to customize it. We do not want to use the generic equals. We want to be able to overwrite the generic equals with our own implementations when we do the comparisons against Java objects. This is a simple example that we're illustrating here. If, let's say, if you have two circle objects and you want to compare to see if both circle objects has the same radii, meaning they have the same values for the radius. C1, C2, they both have radiuses, and you want to compare it to see if their radius are the same. In order to use the dot equal, do you know C1 and C2 are both circle class, which inherits from Java objects? You can override with this @ sign override to specify that this particular one will be overridden by the child class. So this child class is the circle. This belongs to either C1 or C2 as part of the circle class in general. In the circle class, you will have this method that is overriding the behavior of the generic object equals. So this equals says if this object is itself, return true. Else if this object is null, or that this object belongs to another class, then returns false. What you see here is the generic Java implementation. If you're comparing this object, and this object is really myself, then obviously they're the same. If the object is not null, or if this object is of a different Java class, then they are not the same object, return false. The first comparison is pretty obvious. The second comparison is saying that global objects could be the same. If they're not null, they're of the same class. Otherwise, false. So what we are customizing in this case is the circle is coming in. This circle has to be casted because this object is a generic object. When you cast it to the circle, checking to see if this radius itself, which is circle, this is VS, against this object, circle prime. If both radius are the same, we want to say they're equal. So if this radius is not equal, then returns false. So this very last else is the implementation details that is particular to this dot equal. And you're overriding the entire objects equals with this part right here. Let's say if this is not circle, but maybe a zoo class, and you want to compare to see if this zoo number of animals the same as against the other. So you can customize these things to fit your objectives.